I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Urbite heavy cruisers on fire near the asteroid belt. Refueling tunnels longer than the eye could see. A smiling little robot guy in the background scenery that plays no actual part in the game. All this will be lost. All these moments, like tears in rain. Time to fly. Press fire to begin!
Press fire to begin. Alert. Alien craft advancing.
So you're probably thinking, why Parsec? Anybody who knows this computer knows about this game, and there are already a ton of videos about it. What else needs to be said? Well, I'm in the middle of a deep dive for next week's episode, which is much more in-depth and time-consuming than usual. And I was feeling kind of bogged down, so I took a break to play a little Parsec. I realized it had been quite some time since I've just fired up this iconic game and lost myself in it, and it got me thinking about how much Parsec means to the TI world and its place in video game history. First off, let's make this clear. Parsec is the definitive TI-99 4A video game. There's just not an argument to be made otherwise. You can't put it up against anything after the 80s, because as great as modern games have become, none of them have the instant recognition and nostalgia factor Parsec brings. None of them had this visceral of an effect on this many people, and they never could. Parsec was the closest thing to a killer app the 99 4A had. For every person who bought a souped-up system to use TI Writer, 100 rocked a bare console with a speech synthesizer and TI joysticks because they saw Parsec. It was the big game of 1982, a year when TI was really moving units, but when the 99 4A platform was already a few years old. Some of the classic games to that point, like Hunt the Wumpus, Car Wars, and Alpiner, were fine, but they were showing their age. Parsec used scrolling and bitmap graphics 99ers hadn't seen yet. And perhaps most importantly, unlike the only other real contenders for the throne, Parsec wasn't a direct lift from another property. TI Invaders and Munchman are fantastic games, but you can get that experience elsewhere. Making those was a reactive move, not a proactive one. And sure, there are plenty of side-scrolling space shooters out there, but nothing looks, feels, sounds, or plays quite like Parsec.
Good shot. Alert. Ships attacking. Enemy destroyed. Caution. Asteroid belt.
The cover art played a big part in the game's success too. Parsec was the biggest game to come out after TI redesigned all their manuals, so there was no blocky, pixely 1980 box art to rise above. The purple hues, blue and green enemy ships, the treacherous terrain, and the ominous asteroids above all spelled excitement. It's hard not to look at that graphic even now and not get a little psyched up for some arcade action. And of course, there's the speech. Performed by Aubrey Anderson, then a college student in Texas, and pumped out through the optional speech synthesizer add-on, the onboard computer speaking clearly to you and offering encouragement became as much a part of the Parsec experience as the actual play mechanics. The one downside to playing it on Classic 99 is that the speech isn't as smooth and seems to be triggered on some kind of delay, so oftentimes you hear lines like, "Great shot, pilot," or "Laser on target," a few seconds after the shot in question. The only time this has an actual effect on gameplay is during the asteroid belt sequence, at the end of each level. The computer counts down from 5 and pauses longer each level between numbers. And there's no visual indicator on the screen, so if you've got no speech synthesizer, you're out there just winging it till the screen colors change.
shot.
There are 6 kinds of ships to battle before you get to those asteroids. 3 waves of smaller craft that don't fire back, and 3 kinds of heavy cruisers that do. On level 1, you shoot the smaller fighters once and the cruisers twice, and then you have to hit them more on subsequent levels. Starting on level 2, the Binites, the last of the 6 waves before you reach the asteroid belt, can actually turn invisible after being hit by your laser once. The game would be simple if you could just lay on the fire button constantly, but you can blow up if your laser overheats. As the game progresses, it overheats more quickly, so you have to learn to watch your ship carefully to see if it's pulsating red and learn to fire in short bursts with brakes. As if that wasn't enough to keep track of, your ship burns fuel and will eventually need a pit stop, as long as you haven't crashed at any time recently. There are 3 fuel tunnels, each progressively longer. The third one is so long and treacherous that when you stop for fuel and bonus points, you can't even see the end of it yet. Another game mechanic is the lift level, which has 3 settings. This controls the speed of your vertical movement. It's essential for navigating tight spaces in the fuel tunnel. Pressing 1, 2, or 3 sets your lift. 3 is the default. Setting 2 is best for the asteroid belt because your laser fire pattern will stay in a more concentrated area and blast you through a safer path through the rocks without overheating. One of the biggest strategic skills you can master in Parsec is when to switch the lift setting and how quickly to set it back to 3. Coming out of the fuel tunnel in the middle of a Dramite ship wave, for example, you won't stand a chance at lift 1 or 2, because those guys can hustle.
Congratulations. Extra ship. Nice. Fun.
There are lots of other little quirks to remember, too. Just another example, the third wave of light fighters, the saucers, normally come at you from behind, but in a recognizable top-down pattern that enables you to avoid a collision. But if you have more than 4 lives, their pattern becomes completely random. And if you earn an extra ship midway through a saucer wave that gets you up to 4, they switch to a random pattern right then and there. That's the sort of thing you forget when you don't play Parsec for a while, and then you remember as your ship gets obliterated, usually right after you just navigated it through a refueling tunnel. When I list all these things at once, or when you read them in the manual, it seems like a lot to keep track of. But once you've played for a little bit, all these little bylaws become second nature. And even if you haven't played in years, a couple rounds, and it all comes back to you. This is the hallmark of a great game, and Parsec wouldn't be legendary without all these quirks.
5.
The game has 16 levels, and while the number of times you shoot the light cruisers maxes out at 3, they enter the screen closer to you and get faster quicker the further along you go. And if you make it past level 3, you get one more big surprise: the killer satellites. These jerks appear immediately after an asteroid belt. They're faster than even the Dramites, and you never know how many of them are coming in a wave. They were practically mythical to us when we were first learning to play the game as kids, and the first few times we encountered them were quick, chaotic, and very ugly. I don't even want to tell you how many games I just played in order to last long enough to get killer satellite footage for this video. Parsec is one of those rare TI-99 4A games where any nitpicking you could do about its mechanics or presentation would be more about your own personal preferences than the game itself. It's a relatively sedate game, even at the higher levels, delivering attackers in predictable waves and taking advantage of the computer's sprite capabilities while working around its limitations. When it comes to exciting, atmospheric, immersive, non-stop retro arcade game action on the TI-99 4A, it just doesn't get better than Parsec. What's your high score? Do you have one? Do you remember? I used to be able to post up over 100,000, but as you've seen so far, I'm going to need to get some chops back up for that to happen again. Post your high scores in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you had a good time. We put these videos up every Friday, and we'll see you in 1 week, right here in the War Room.